Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now today we're going to be looking at the Minisforum EliteMini AI370 and comparing its gaming performance to the once very popular GTX 1060. So I've ticked the paid promotion box for this video because I received this unit for free for the purpose of review. Just want to be completely honest with you. There's currently a Black Friday sale on until the 30th of November which will knock £100 or dollars off. So here in the UK this will cost you $979 or $1079 after the sale. It comes with a Ryzen AI 9 HX370, which of course has the integrated 890M graphics, 32 gigs of 7500MHz LPDDR5X, and a 1TB M.2 SSD. In terms of upgrades, we get a secondary slot for another SSD, which is accessible by removing 4 bottom screws and lifting out this cover. All of this is enclosed in a pretty lightweight plastic body with plenty of ports, including HDMI DisplayPort 2.5G Ethernet, USB 3.2 and USB 4. I think you have to be pretty committed to the form factor to spend this sort of money, but performance wise it is a fast little system, as it should be. There's a quiet, balanced or performance mode within the BIOS, and of course I chose the latter. Even so, this thing didn't consume any more than 50 watts according to the Afterburner and Riva Tuner overlay. For some context, I compared the rendering speed to an i9-14900K limited to 125 watts for the sake of my super cheap air cooler, and the Ryzen 9 pulled ahead by a strong margin. But here on this channel we're all about the gaming. I left the AI370 in performance mode and put the performance stats including power consumption up on screen. I stuck to native 1080p resolution for the sake of the upcoming comparison to the 6GB 1060, but first here's the iGPU results. So we'll start off with a more obscure title, I guess. I don't think many people are playing this one anymore, but I think it still looks pretty good and it's a good test for our system too. This is Assassin's Creed Mirage on the 890M with 1080p in the medium settings, so no upscaling was used here, nor was it for any of the other results either. We're also using TAA at 100% resolution with no dynamic res enabled for an average of 51 FPS, a 1% low of 34 and a 0.1% low of 27. Next up we have Call of Duty Black Ops 6 at the basic settings here, 1080p resolution for at least 60 frames per second overall. The 1% low was 52 and the 0.1% low was 46, so this goes to show that even without a graphics card here this game will run pretty nicely, and it also looks okay, I feel, with these settings. So the 890M is definitely good for at least 60 FPS across pretty much every multiplayer game that I played today. Now surprisingly, Cyberpunk 2077 does run at native 1080p resolution, albeit with the lowest settings, at plus 60 FPS, 62 on average. Here, the frame rate does drop a bit in and around busier areas, of course, but with a 1% low of 48 and a 0.1% low of 42, I think it was still a somewhat consistent experience. Now we don't actually need to select the performance API for Fortnite because it will run at the medium settings with at least 60 frames per second. In fact, 90 was our average on the 890M and AI9 HX370. I can't get over that name, it just sounds so silly. Just call it Ryzen 9, not AI9. I mean, just Ryzen 9 will be fine. I know it's probably good at AI stuff, but I just can't remember it. I have to read it every time I say it. GTA 5 is good for 100 frames per second on average with the highest settings, and the detail slider set to halfway with FXAA enabled. We could possibly enable some sort of MSAA here as well, but I think it's pretty unnecessary, especially when we are using an iGPU, because MSAA will cause some significant drops in and around those busier areas. But here with the 890M, a pretty impressive 100 frames per second, but we'll see how this and others holds up in comparison to the once legendary 1060, of course, very soon. Now, as always, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a bit of a problem with these integrated graphics. There's a stutter every so often. We're running at 46 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 28 and a 0.1% low of 26, which shows you everything you need to know here, really. Every so often there's like a visible micro stutter on screen. Don't get me wrong, the average figure was still fine. 46 frames per second is okay in my opinion. It's just a shame about the little stutters that appeared every so often. And finally we have Stalker 2, potentially the most demanding game that I tried to play on 890M integrated graphics. Couldn't quite hit 30 frames per second at native resolution, albeit with the lowest settings in TAA, so this was a bit of a problem. This one we definitely need upscaling for. I'll show you actually that it can run at plus 30 frames per second, because it's the only game that I really felt I needed to enable upscaling for today. We won't use this for the comparison that's coming up, but I'll just show you that if we switch FSR to balance, then we can hit at least 30 frames per second, as you can see here, and this is definitely the way to play. It will affect the visuals slightly, it'll look a bit blurrier of course, but it does make things all the more playable. We start to see towards 40 FPS as well, high 30s, sometimes low 40s, which definitely helps. That said, it doesn't perform too differently from the 780M that we tested the other day. Now then, what we have here is the GTX 1060 6GB. Once a very popular mid-range choice, it can struggle with some more modern titles. That said, it's pretty cheap these days and has the potential to surprise you performance-wise. Here is a brief showcase of its capabilities. I'm using a 14900K and 32GB of 6400MHz dual channel memory in pairing with this card, which is more than enough for this thing to reach its maximum potential. I'll run through the figures quickly here. As you can see on screen, I'll just show you this footage and then we'll actually put the comparative results with the 890M on screen. So I've actually written all of these up on screen for convenience sake so that you can easily see which games came out on top. So we'll have a quick read through those now. So we'll start with Stalker 2 this time around. The 1060 6GB hit 30 frames per second with a 1% low of 25 and a 0.1% low of 22. This was 5 frames per second more than the 890M, and the percentile lows were also slightly improved as well. For Call of Duty Black Ops 6, we actually saw a better result for the Radeon 890M as part of the EliteMini mini machine, 67 FPS compared to 55. The percentile lows were also a lot better in my opinion, 52 and 46 compared to 37 and 33 respectively. So a nice jump in performance for the integrated solution, which was quite a surprise. Now in Fortnite, these figures went back the other way. The 1060 did outperform the Radeon, but there was about a 20 FPS average all in all, and I don't think that this is a bad result for the 890M at all. If anything, it goes to show just how far these integrated graphics have come over the years. In terms of the percentile lows, yeah, we did see a few more dips and drops with the iGPU. For Assassin's Creed Mirage 1080p medium, the 1060 did pull ahead with 64 FPS on average, and the percentile lows were also improved. That said, the 890M put up a pretty solid effort in my opinion. Now Cyberpunk, and we go back the other way once again with the Radeon iGPU pulling ahead at 62 frames per second. Perhaps the faster RAM helps here, but whatever the case, this game does favour the Radeon. 62 FPS with a 1% low of 48 and 42 compared to 57, 45 and 31. So definitely a smoother experience from the EliteMini today. Red Dead Redemption 2, as you know, of course has those issues with iGPUs, but 58 frames per second on the 1060 meant it pulled ahead by about 12 FPS on average. Not just that, but the 1% and 0.1% figures were quite a bit better as well. For GTA 5, we couldn't quite keep up with the Radeon 890M, 100 compared to 158, but it is still a solid effort in my opinion, so I'm pretty happy with how it performed on both. Now overall, the EliteMini AI370 is an expensive mini machine. Even with the current Black Friday sale, I do think it is a lot of money, and I think you're going to have to be very committed to the form factor in order to purchase one. That said, there clearly is still an audience for these because they still sell, they still make them after all, and it's always impressive how much power can be squeezed into these little boxes, and not only that, but how little power they actually consume too. I mean, this thing was hitting less than 50 watts across all of today's tests. I think if you want something that's really powerful in terms of CPU performance, you care about editing, things like that, this is going to be absolutely perfect. Not only that, but money is no object as well. For everyone else, you're better off building yourself a custom rig if it's just gaming that you care about and you have no problems with taking up more space. Of course, I do like to keep an eye on these mini machines. I don't really do a review in the traditional sense with them, because I much rather compare them to desktop equivalents and see how they get on. And I think this one fared pretty well. I was surprised by the Cyberpunk and Black Ops 6 results today, to be honest. And if I tested more games, I think we might find that there are a good handful whereby the 890M will pull ahead. But let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.